So hello, everybody, and welcome to Sioka Center's Lunch and Learn series from the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America. So thanks very much for joining us. Thank you very much if you are a repeat viewer, and welcome if you're here for the first time. My name is Andreas Widmer, and I'm the director for the Sioka Center of Principled Entrepreneurship, and I will be your host. These lunch and learns, this is our third. We've been doing this for a while, but this is our third in this semester. And we put this semester under the umbrella of the Gospel of Work series that we have launched earlier in the year. And today our focus is how people of faith can lead within a secular institution. And we want to sort of create or provide actionable advice for faith-filled professionals. And our actual objective with this is really to create a community among us where we can exchange ideas and questions and so on and help each other in that sense. The way this is going to be structured is that we will have a discussion. I have a guest, and then we have a discussion for about a half an hour. And in the second half hour, everybody chimes in and we start to have a larger discussion or ask our guest specific questions. Today, we start and we talk about the Gospel of Work, and specifically in how we can be better Christians, better Catholics at work. And we like to start these events with a prayer. So if you want to join me in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Glorious Saint Joseph, model of all those who are devoted to labor, obtain for me the grace to work conscientiously, putting the call of duty above my many sins, to work with thankfulness and joy, considering it an honor to employ and develop by means of labor the gifts received from God, to work with order, peace, prudence, patience, never surrendering to weariness or difficulties, to work above all with purity of intention and with detachment from self, having always death before my eyes and the account which I must render of time lost, of talents wasted, of good omitted, of vain complacency in success so fatal to the work of God. All for Jesus, all for Mary, all after thy example, O Patriarch Joseph. Such shall be my motto in life and in death. Amen. In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So today's guest, Lee Carosi Dunn, is the director for policy for the North America, for the director of cloud policy for North America at Google Cloud. She is a graduate of Catholic University's School of Law, and she's a distinguished fellow with us at the Sioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship, but she's also a featured speaker in the Gospel of Work, where she has collaborated with us to create a video series that I hope you have all had the pleasure to see and to watch. She now works at Google for well over 10 years, had several roles there, but has a very illustrious background. She was before you worked with the Federal Communications Commission. Before that, you worked as general counsel to the Senate office of John McCain, God rest his soul. Then you worked in a law firm, Dow, Loans and Albertson, and you worked at Bell Systems. You had a very varied career, and I'm so happy to have you here today, Lee. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andreas. I go wherever you tell us to go because we're all happy to do anything to support you and the Gospel of Work. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been fun. It was a few years ago we filmed you for this. I think it was in the summer 2 years ago or something. Right.
Yeah.
We came right out of COVID and we were in a studio downtown here, no?
Yes.
I remember when you talked, you've been in some of my classes before, and students always loved what you had to say. And you have a way of saying this, which is in a way encompasses what we are supposed to be and do at work. I remember your advice to my students one day when they say, well, how are you going to be a Christian? in your work and so on, you say, well, first of all, don't be a jerk. Right? I think that's the, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit for me?
Sure. It's it's funny what people remember, and I did get a number of students reach out to me afterwards and say that seems like such simple advice, but it was good to hear or be reminded. And I think for some of your students, it was good to be reminded that not being a jerk can be a huge, accelerator to your career, right? And that's where bringing your faith, maybe quietly in a way, but very outwardly in another way, can make you so impactful in the job market, in at a company, wherever you choose to work, the government, a nonprofit, an educational setting. And we're very fortunate that I think our faith leads us to hopefully be not only good workers, but good people. And, I really explained to the students that not being a jerk, not assuming the worst of people can get you really far in your career. I see it all the time, whether it was here at Google or in the government. Why didn't you copy me on that email? Why didn't you invite me to that meeting? Why did you not cite me as being on the cross-functional team working on X? And it's always, you're diminishing my contribution, you're disparaging me. And, using that moment to stop, uh, think the best of that person. Maybe it was an oversight. Maybe they forgot. Maybe they didn't know about your contribution. Maybe they didn't know you were interested in this issue. And just reaching out to that person, and simply saying, hey, I worked on this project and I'd really like to be part of these meetings. I feel like I have a contribution. I don't know if you know I worked on this, but I'd really love to tell you a little bit about my work on this project, and maybe we could sit and have a cup of coffee, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. And so really, being that person in the office environment or the work setting that doesn't assume the worst of people. And then, really using your, hopefully God-given talents and your faith to reach out to other people, to get to know them and support them in the same work environment, and carry some of their burden at times, and hopefully they'll carry some of yours. So I think it's a really simple piece of advice that is funny how many, I think, younger people, but as we all know, even those of us who have grown long in the tooth in the workplace need to remember is, it's really, people can go really far in their career just frankly sometimes being a nice person who cares about others.
And we see the other side. The reason why it resonates with me so much, Lee, is that the media and our culture often holds up the jerks as the prime example. And I think this is actually counterproductive in business, in my experience in business, that being collaborative actually leads to much more success for the overall economy, for the company, and for each other than the jerk kind of image, even though that's to a large extent what's being celebrated. And in the videos that you talk about is, and I'd love to have your advice on this and maybe some of your ideas about how you talked about to be intentional about how to leave a legacy through your work. And especially somebody like you, I don't know whether you planned this. I mean, you had such a variety of jobs in the public sector, the private sector. How do you go about and how are you conscious about planning, building or leaving a legacy at work? Do you have some ideas or do you have a plan for that?
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about this with your students on the video. I think that's something that is incumbent upon us as humans, but hopefully as well as Catholics, is mentoring those who, maybe not even those that are younger, but maybe those who are struggling or those who are having challenges in the workplace, and forming those friendships and forming those bonds where you're each other's support network. That can be an incredible legacy.
Somebody's innate personality. And that's a really interesting thing to observe, because then you can very quickly bucket sort where do you want to spend time and who is really, additive to your gameplay.
Hold on.
And who is really a negative detractor to your gameplay.
No, I thought whoever was saying it or whatever recording was good.
Sorry, I'm that didn't come through right. Let's go to the questions afterwards. Let's first have you, Lee, you and I talk, and then everybody else joins in right after.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the legacy can really be about being a mentor, a friend, a supporter of others in the workplace. And I think that's an incredible legacy, right? All of us have worked at different places where you've left and you bump into a former coworker at a coffee shop or at a restaurant and they say, oh, we really miss your humor. We really miss your, help in bringing together the, annual giving campaign. We really miss, and that's really important. And it's really something that we can bring to the workplace, and a lot of people do in this world. And people, I think, choose to focus more on the achievements that are on their resume than sometimes thinking about what type of personal legacy do you leave at that workplace or with your peers or with the greater industry community. I would say for me, one of the things that makes me most happy about my career is the number of people I've seen rise in their career because I helped them get that first interview, or I helped them prepare for that interview, or I shepherded their resume somewhere. And I love that. I love that more than a big sales win or a big legislation win or anything like that, because it's helping someone who's probably going to make a bigger difference than even I did. And it's incredibly fulfilling. And because you do this with students and entrepreneurs all the time.
Lee, that reminds me, you have this, I was really moved. You have you talk about this, you almost have you follow the little way of saying you do small, what do you call it? Small things that you connect to the larger things that you're doing. And so you're quite intentional actually in how you deal with people around you, with people who work for you and so on. How do you plan those small things, or you're just conscious of it? And do you have some of your favorite small things you're doing with people?
Yeah, I think it's just something I enjoy, but the small things can be so simple as, I tell often people, it's really hard to spam a resume around. But if you find a job ad out there, or you hear of a job at X company or X place, please, email me and say, hey, do you know anybody at ABC company? And if I don't, maybe my brother does, or my husband, or my coworker. And so it's a really easy way to bring other people into the fold to help. And people love to be part of a team, rooting for someone or cheering someone on or giving them their success. And so that's something that I feel I've been really successful at and I've really enjoyed. And it's a really little thing. Like, how hard is it to send an email to your peers or your network and say, anybody know anybody at ABC company? My colleague, my friend, a new contact I met is applying for this role there, and then seeing where that goes from there. And then I think another thing we talked about that I love and is a practice we have at Google, but I've seen it implemented at schools and in other workplaces, is we call it Lunch Ninja. And once a month, or whatever you want, once every 3 months, we sign up for this program where the Google algorithm, or you can put names in a hat and pick, pairs you up with somebody in the office and schedules you to have lunch with them. And it could be someone that you've already worked with, but it could be someone that you've seen in the hall, you've sort of said hi, you've never given them your name. And it's an incredible bonding experience to get to know that person. And even though you might work in totally different divisions or do totally different things or be incredibly different levels at a workplace, you and I, Andreas, have talked about, the breaking of bread with someone is such an intimate and bonding experience. And what a way to give of yourself a little bit to get to know a coworker and get so much in return. And so little examples like that, reaching out to someone who you see in the hall and you said, hey, we see each other in the hall, why don't we grab coffee next week so we get to know each other? And I'd love to be able to say, hi, Bob, instead of just, giving you sort of a nod of my head. So those little actions, and I know you and I have talked about this, can turn into monumental roles in one's career, one's life, or one's ability to give to others. And I think that's really important and something we can bring to the workplace besides just productivity or, success in a business setting.
And I think you see yourself as a bridge builder. I think we talked about this once, that you're actually trying to focus on what unites people in the company rather than what divides them, because they have to move forward together. Is it difficult to, so you've been in the administrative state and then in the legislature, and now you're in the private sector. Can you behave the same in each one of these groups? You as a person working in the environment and do these things work in all of these environments?
I think so. I mean, I've been in incredibly divisive environments. The U.S. Congress, no matter what people think, if it's worse today than it was 10 years ago. I mean, I was there during some really challenging times on some challenging pieces of legislation. I think back to working with Senator McCain during immigration reform, where people in the same party, even in the same state, were on polar opposites of an issue. And look, Senator McCain didn't always comport himself with the perfect gentleman valor that he should at times, but he also, when he did get frustrated as colleagues and sometimes name call, he did return with apology usually. And I think that's a huge moment too. But I did also see him, and I saw myself, and I saw so many of my peers cross backgrounds, cross parties, cross policies, say, I don't agree with you on this, but can't we work on this part? And I saw it again and again. So it was a great sort of training ground for life. You may not see eye to eye on so many issues, but there has to be something you agree on, or there has to be something that you both enjoy. And that can, begin to build a bridge toward maybe a greater project, a greater success. And so it's sort of, it becomes cliche stories in Washington, but for any of us who have lived in DC, you see it happen all the time. And I know it happens throughout the country, but it's a really good skill to have. And again, to not go into any environment and feel that you're, mentally arming yourself against others. Instead, you're showing up and you're looking for those bridges, and you're looking for those, ways to contribute cross-functionally and in a team setting. Again, going back to really thinking the best of each other.
One of the things that fascinates me is that because you have this perspective that you've been in the administrative state and you have done legislation or you helped. Now in business, actually, one of the things that you promote is to appreciate business as business, to actually focus. I think actually quoted something I can quote something you're saying is the real impact on business, on society, is through what it does rather than through things that are disconnected what the business activity actually does. Business as a social good, as business. Can you double click on that for me?
Yeah, I loved a lot of what you taught me too. And we've had these great conversations about is you might be running a business to sell widgets. And I see this a lot. We've talked a little bit about my father and my brother run a family business. And, I think it hit my father being a, fourth generation family business is we're not just, selling widgets. We're providing, a livelihood for others. We're providing an environment where people have met and married and formed incredible bonds and friendships, and who have supported each other, fundraising for a trip abroad to see one's mother who's sick, or, done meal trains to help someone whose, child is sick. And that, I think, especially for those of us, just anyone, but I do think it's something that I love the Bush School really promotes, is capitalism is not evil. It's providing that environment for communities to grow, humans to engage, the world to improve. And I think it's really important. And, I've always loved sort of the, another great man of faith, Arthur Brooks from AEI, used to talk about the, value of work and what it brings to the psyche and to one's contribution to society. And I think that's so important. And I love those messages because otherwise, I have to be honest, we've seen sometimes these days in politics and in rhetoric, I work for the tech company, the tech industry, and they've been very beaten up by a number of activists, by a number of political sides. And, some of that may be true, some of that may be false. People can have their thoughts and opinions. But at the end of the day, just remembering that beyond providing a service or selling a good, what you're bringing to the world. Again, a community, an environment, people coming together, people having worth in their value of what they can contribute is so impactful.
Yeah. I do, at my core belief, and it's one of the reasons why I really respect what you're doing a lot, is our call is to be the leaven in the world. And that means the leaven needs to go everywhere. I was involved early on in the internet. I was involved in speech recognition. There's a lot of bad things that happened while I was there as well. But if we're not going in there and are the leaven, and I'm very passionate about this, that we as Catholics, as Christians, we have to go into every corner and into all activities and not say, oh, I'm not participating in this. And especially in technology and anything of innovation, also in science innovation, we ought to be there and we ought to contribute and be a part of the solution. That doesn't mean that we control everything, but surely if we're not going to participate, it's like in legislation in a sense. If you're not going to run for politics, you have no right to complain about it afterwards. Like
or if you're not even going to vote, right?
Yeah. And I think you're a super great example and really inspiring for our students of somebody you go smack right into the middle and you have a way to do this with a wonderful personality and with this little way, as you would say, to actually engage people with lunch, with doing something for them, with the small things rather than first trying to solve everything. And I commend you for that. It's very inspirational.
Well, and I think we've talked about with your students, especially this younger generation, they don't view work as just a place to go and make a salary. You know, they really see mission and passion in what they do, and they choose a workplace based on that. Where I feel, you know, previous generations, we were happy to be employed, frankly, at some periods in the economy or our lives, or, you know, we were grateful for just the ability to earn a living. But, you know, the younger generations are really looking for that mission, service, passion, orient in their role. And one of the things I know we've talked about with your students is sometimes that passion can earn you a living. And sometimes you're earning a living to contribute to you pursuing that passion outside of the workplace. And both are fulfilling, both are good. You know, as my friend used to remind me, very few people are able to make, you know, their passion or their hobby their living. Those who are really lucky, you know, I'd love to be, you know, a, you know, professional, you know, ballerina, make money from that, but it's not going to happen. But, you know, if my workplace gives me the funding and maybe the flexibility to take a dance class or teach a dance class or work with, you know, that can be really fulfilling too. And just finding a way to mix those in your lives. And I think the younger generations have a lot to teach a lot of us that are older on how to get that fulfillment. And again, maybe it's not personally in the workplace through what you do day to day, but in the surroundings, you know, maybe starting a dance class at your workplace or something of that nature. That's, again, bringing people together and creating those communities.
I'd love to open it up if there are some questions. Let me go to the different view here. I don't know how you're seeing all this. But if we could, if you may, please, if you're participating, and now would be a good time to turn on the camera if you're if you're so inclined, so that we can have this discussion now a little bit. I want to open up the floor to anybody who wants to. Either you can put up the hand on this just physically, or on the Google on the Zoom screen here. Tim, how are you? Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good. Very good. I would just like the both of you to expand on this comment that was made. There's always something, and I put polar opposites, it may not have been the words that were used, can enjoy together. How do you bring those people that have polar opposites together, or do you get them to do it themselves?
You know, I will say this is a great lesson I learned in politics, but there's always something. And I feel I often, you know, tell sometimes people, channel your inner Oprah, ask people about themselves, you know, oh, you know, do you have children? Where are you from? Have you ever traveled to X? You know, is this your first time being here? And it'll be amazing from a few simple questions that aren't too personal, usually aren't too probing, are sort of general societal norms of what you can find out about each other. Maybe you both recently traveled to Paris. Maybe you both, you know, attend the same church. Maybe your kids are at the same school. And I found that in both, you know, politics and in the business world to be something that's great, right? You find that one bond, both of our, for me, I know I have a colleague and both of our great grandparents immigrated from the same area in Italy. And so we've talked about that, and we work on different areas, we're very dissimilar, honestly, we're different ages and we're different politics, but that is something that at least when we see each other sometimes, we just catch up on that facet. So I feel like, that's something that I really watched, and frankly, politicians are good at because they have to be, right? Is finding that commonality. And there's usually something that you can find. And I really, I tell the students a lot, channel your inner Oprah and ask those, questions that are open-ended and, not too personal, but can really open up that opportunity to find that you have something in common.
One of the things I want to add to this, Tim, I'm going to let it come right back to you, but you cannot interact with people if you don't love them. And we as Christians should really focus on this. I know that, I had the privilege to work with John Paul II. And one of the things he said, they always, how you get all these people who say, well, I heard John Paul speak and I was 1 in a million people and I felt like he spoke to me. When he's being asked why that is, or why he has this impact on people, he says, it's not me, but I tell you a trick. Every time I meet people, or I'm preparing to meet somebody, or I'm preparing to give a homily, a talk, or whatever, he says, I pray to the Holy Spirit and I say, Lord, the people I'm meeting today, they would not exist if you wouldn't love them. They would just cease to exist immediately. Therefore, you must love the people I'm going to meet, even if I disagree with them. Give me your eyes and make me see them the way you see them, because you do love them. And so then he goes in and he says that the prayers to the Holy Spirit are always answered when you're asking for this. And I encourage you all to, I try to do this myself. And I find it's one of the more effective prayers I know how to say. Tim, are we giving you a kind of answer?
That was fabulous. I appreciate it both very much. Thank you.
Maybe I'll say one last thing, Andreas. I think Pope John Paul and Senator John McCain are, I hope, both in heaven and laughing that their name would even be used in the same sentence. But I think, I never was able to, have a personal audience with the Pope or meet him like you did or work with him. But what comes across in any video you watch or any, I did attend a larger gathering once, but, to your point, that personal feeling. And one of the things I think Senator McCain had in common is even when you're, whether for them, it's almost the celebrity, disarming people. And so same thing, if you're super tall, like someone I know named Andreas is, or, super funny, or have, super great red hair or something, allowing that to be disarming about you and not intimidating can really help. And I'll give another example is I don't know why this came to mind, but I used to always watch, when I'd go with Senator McCain places for people, they'd sort of stand back and look, and then you'd see them whispering, and he would just say, hey, I'm John McCain. Who are you? And they'd be like, oh my gosh, what? We were just whispering about you, and you stepped in and introduced yourself. And, I also would see, we'd be at the Senate and he'd be rushing to the floor to go to a vote. And, there was a elevator in the Senate that says senators only. And, the elevator would come and it'd be the senators only elevator. And you'd see these tourists be sort of like, oh, should we get on? And he'd just start saying to them, get on, act like you own the place, because you do. Your tax dollars built this place. Get on, come on, get on this elevator. And again, sharing a ride, breaking bread, taking a picture together, extending your hand, smiling, disarms people so quickly if you're a celebrity or just anybody in the workplace that you may come upon. And I think that is, and you could see, people used to always talk about Pope John Paul, just how he would, to your point, zero in if he met you, or find that person in the audience who he had that, drawn connection with. And it's something that I think hopefully we can all model in our own lives.
Thank you. Clara, it's nice to see you. Thanks for being here from Boston, Massachusetts. I can't, yeah, there you go.
I would like to bring the First of all, I think that we all want to do something big, and that's where we go wrong. Because small people, unknown, everyday Joe Schmo can do the same thing what John Paul II did. My parents were extremely good, and under desperate circumstances, they were able to bring people together during the communist era. And I always asked them that, how do you do this? And they said, talk to the Holy Spirit. So I started to talk to the Holy Spirit when I raised my teenager. So before I opened my mouth, I asked the Holy Spirit to put the word on my mouth, on my tongue. So, and this is not a joke. And and that's what we need to do. Have to set our goals. What is my goal? Do I want to be a pleasant, a peace element in people's life and love, or I want to be right and argue and bash others and badmouth others. So it starts in the family, and then we can expand it to the rest of the society. And we always learn. You can see I am pretty old, and I started a rosary every night 2 years ago on Zoom, and rosary leader was very much opposite of my views of the world and politics, and made a few comments, and we started to negotiate that we just do the rosary and no politics. And 2 years later, everybody who is involved survived that because we focused on loving the rosary, loving each other.
Beautiful. Thank you, Clara. Thank you. David, you have your hand up as well. I'm glad you're here, David.
Oh, me too. Thank you. This has been really incredible. And I find, Lee, your background is absolutely fascinating, and really appreciated the comments at the first regarding assuming people's motives and things like that. I guess I was just wondering if you might be able to comment, having participated, at the ultimate levels of power and in the halls of power in government and things like that. And especially, and also in business, I've experienced where, it is a game of chess, and people do have motives, and people do want to accomplish certain things and use various strategies to do so, which have found me at least frustrated and, maybe a little less Christ-like than I would like to be in those situations. And I was just wondering, you've done a lot in terms of talking about how you navigate some of that, but was just wondering if you had any more insights.
No, I think like you, sometimes I wish I had more Christ-like thoughts, even when people are being self-centered or selfish. But I don't know. I think, and maybe you've seen some of this too, a lot of those people implode at some point. But I think one of the things that I love about a lot of what Andreas is teaching the students, the Bush School, and what I'm seeing in all these students and the sort of the learnings of gospel work is the fact that you can be driven and opportunistic and aggressive and climbing, still with the ability to be Christ-like and kind and humble and giving. And so my hope is that people who are not always motivated by the right means, can see others that are doing the same thing they are, hopefully winning as well, but also doing it with a different manner. And that becomes an example to them that you don't have to, act out in a certain way to get the same result. So I hope that a lot of us in our own lives continue to prop up those people in the workplace or at our volunteer or our school, that we see And back to Claire's point, doing the little things too, right? I mean, it sounds so simple, but even opening a door for someone, when you're walking in the building, is just that notion of, welcome to work, welcome to school, welcome to my office if you're a customer, and so it can be such a little thing that we see people do that can really set the tone for building that. So I hope we continue to see good people lead by example. And I think we have some really good examples at the Bush School, even the Bushes, and so I hope that this program honestly, contributes a whole generation of leaders, and that you see other business programs start to talk about ethics, faith, kindness in capitalism and in business and entrepreneurship. So and I do think the younger generations, especially with the students that Andreas is talking about, but I work with a lot of young people at Google, and I although I do see a lot of that they really do want to bring that kindness and that community to the workplace. So I am, optimistic about it, and and hopefully it's not a return to the 80s and what was the movie Greed is Good, of Wall Street.
Yeah. On that account, Rebecca and I were actually talking this morning about this, and I think that we have to assume that the people that we're dealing with, that we should not assume a bad intention behind it. And we just earlier this year we had this conference on principled entrepreneurship up in New York, and one of the people speaking, and she was speaking on Rebecca's panel, was Mary Eberstadt. I don't know if you all have ever heard her, but she gave a really great interview on something on a platform called Edify. Check it out. It's maybe a 15-minute, 10-minute thing she explains, and she gives you the bridge to something, especially when we're talking about intergenerational, which Lee, you just talked about, and you actually have the attitude that Mary Eberstadt describes, to say you have to assume that these kids actually, they mean well. This may come out in all kinds of ways, but they actually mean well. And then she goes on to explain to you that the lack of an upbringing in a proper Christian or Catholic community actually doesn't satisfy, or doesn't, they don't have religion, and therefore they have a need for this. And every need bends, and if it's not going to be God, then they're going to find something else that they're trying to satiate themselves with it. And in the absence of us in the church being stronger about our evangelization, they are going to replace this with other things. And then she goes and she starts to talk about all of these trends that are going on. And one by one, she's going to explain to you how these actually are exactly like religion. There is judgment and sin and redemption and the whole thing in it, except it's a replacement of the actual religion. And so her call to us is to evangelize them through understanding that they're actually looking for like every soul is looking for God. It's like Augustine, right? What Augustine says. And so this gives us this opportunity that inspires me, that you're saying, Lee, that you don't start this with a Aquinas dissertation. You're starting this in a little way, right? You're starting, just have lunch with them. Start having lunch, and then approach them like not their enemy, but to find what you say is common ground. Find if they like Paris and you've been to Paris.
Yeah, hold the door open for them when they're running in late to the office and saying, "Hey, I'm here to help you be on time." I think that is an interesting concept. I can't wait to watch that, because I do see some younger people who don't have an upbringing with faith, whether it's Christian or another faith, or belief in a higher being or something more than themselves, come into some of these jobs and careers, and they put a lot of their trust and faith in an institution or their employer. And so I think some of us who have faith and communities based on our religion or our beliefs have some basis that some people who don't have a faith basis start to put a lot of that into, again, their employer or the institutions that they're working for or serving. And I think those of us who have found our faith and our religion are so much more fortunate to know that there's more than that paycheck or that job.
Thank you. Let me see if there's another question. I can't resist to ask you, Lee, that with all your work on Capitol Hill and dealing with presidents in the White House, do you have some highlights of some of the maybe favorite memories of things that you were able to participate with? I know you had to deal with some of the negotiations that were more on the painful side, but what about some of the highlights?
Yeah, no, there were definitely, I see Michael's hand up, I think maybe down there, but yeah, there were definitely highlights. I don't know, one that's super personal is, it was toward the end of my career when I was working for Senator McCain when there was a horrific shooting in Tucson. And I had been working with, we were in the process of building a new courthouse in the city of Tucson, a federal courthouse. And the chief judge in the federal court system in Arizona, Judge Roll, was just such a model in grace and service to others. He had huge dockets for immigration cases that I know he stayed late, and I know he worked a lot of hours, as well as the other judges there, to clear the backlog and help give people some level of certainty in their life. And he was just, I know he was a man of faith and a man of the law, and he was gunned down at that event. And I personally believe he went to that event to advocate with Congresswoman Giffords about the new courthouse and how excited and important it was to him. And after we sort of got through the, sort of the morning, McCain said, we got to name this courthouse after Judge Roll. And I said, I agree. And everyone else agreed. But typical government, there's always a process to naming anything, right? I mean, we still work in a government where I would say, over the course of a month, there's probably at least 30 post offices that require a bill to be named. So if Congress says they don't pass anything, they pass a lot of post office naming bills, which it's hard to imagine that takes up paper these days, but that can be controversial in itself. And so we had to go through the process. And a great example is that when we had to sponsor a bill and legislation to have Judge Roll's name ascribed as the name of the courthouse. And I will say, President Obama was so gracious to have all of us come to the Oval Office and have him sign the bill and all of us just be together. And frankly, it was not a good time for McCain and Obama. They were, not only rivals in the previous presidential election, but to be honest, he had been sort of spiritedly, pointedly, in my opinion, sometimes kind of mean to Senator McCain at some points. And, we watched them to come together as leaders to sign this bill and sort of have a moment in honor of Judge Roll. And so everybody else in that room, Republican and Democrat, did the same and followed their lead. And sometimes I think about that as I look to, Senator McCain's funeral when he did ask Obama to help eulogize him, which a lot of us found sort of striking, right? You have so many people in the world that you could ask, and you ask your former rival. And so, I often point that to others too, is, what are you doing in this world and how are you serving this world? And are you living your life in a way that if your former rival was asked to eulogize you at their funeral, would they say you were not only a worthy opponent, but, someone who was a good person and ethical and, and drove the competition higher? That's a really good way to think of yourself in business and in life.
Be good if politics were like this always, where the opponents can actually eulogize each other.
I think we'll get there. I think we're going through different times in life, but I do think we'll get there. And I think there's so many people that are already there today. So I just hope that those people continue to speak out about their friendships, their relationships, their ability to work together. And that goes for all of us in workplaces and in communities as well.
It's the same. It's a mirror. Society is always mirrored in the different appearances. And the mirror is in companies. How many times have I been in companies where product market, the classic is product marketing and sales. They always fight with each other. And there's no connection between the two, because sales always advance sales. As soon as product marketing says something, it goes out. If sales hears about it, forget about it. They're going to pre-sell technology, right?
Yeah.
And that's where this comes in again, that we can be bridge builders and peacemakers, and to actually do exactly those kind of things that you're saying. Let me see. Do we have another question? I thought I saw a hand up before. Who was it? Michael, do you have a question? Or Rebecca, you just unmuted.
I did have a question, but I actually see that David is way ahead of me. He had a question in chat, which was, do you think that these younger generations can return us to the civility that we've lost in recent years?
I think so. I'm pretty bullish on our younger generations. I work with a lot of them. A lot of young people work in tech, and I think they're more open. I just think they're more open and they're more well-traveled than some of us were. So they've experienced a lot more of differences. And so I just think they're more forgiving and a little bit more open. So I have a lot of faith in the younger generations, despite the fact that we see a lot of younger generations losing their faith, right? And, but I think they have a lot more of a worldly perspective and a perspective of bringing people together than maybe some of the others generations did, just because we didn't have access to travel or access to know people from different places or different backgrounds like people do today.
Yeah. Especially with the evangelization, I always remember how Pope Benedict, I used to love remember how he would give like these off the cuff interviews, like in the Apostolic Palace, many times to German TVs, and there would be 3 reporters sitting in front of him, just peppering him with questions. And one of the things they say, well, exactly this issue, well, what do you think about the next generation, and aren't we losing them and everything? And he turns to the camera and he goes, well, it would help to be able to recognize that what we preach is the good news. And what he means with this is that we should actually preach the good news. This is all happy and good news that we're preaching. A return to Christ is the good news. And he laments the fact that if you start with the rules first, it's very counterproductive. It's just like with meeting somebody for lunch or so. Let's first talk about what we agree on and what we can actually identify with each other, and then go from there. That always struck with me about how Benedict talked. That you wouldn't expect that. Let's see. Do we have anybody else? Great. So what I want to do then, let me see. I want to talk about the next person that's coming. But Lee, is there anything you want to leave us with before we go?
No, just thank you for your work, Andreas. I feel like there's a lot of students that are learning a lot and really going to be put forth into the world to be great stewards of, so many virtues in the business community. So thank you. And I know all of us support a lot of your work, and we're very proud of what you're doing. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Lee. That means a lot. Couldn't do it with all your help. And I do hope, just everybody who's on this call, we're trying to create a community here, that we help each other, support each other, that you also feed us. Eventually, people will get to know each other in these calls, and that we literally can deal with specific issues, that you let me know what you'd like me to find somebody to answer, an expert on a topic that has to do with faith in business. And then our team will go out and find somebody like that and specifically come up with a discussion around solutions of what we can do. That was the aim of the Gospel of Work, and that is sort of through these lunch and learns, the continuation of it. And the next lunch and learn is going to be on Tuesday, December 13th. This time, Luke Burgess will be the host, and he will be joined in we're sort of showing you all the different participants in the Gospel of Work. This time it's Brandon Vadianathan, who's actually from our sociology. He's the head of our sociology school or department here at the Catholic University. And his expertise is he studies the role of beauty in human experience. This is going to be fascinating and interesting. I ask you to please register on Eventbrite, and we'll see you all on December 13th. In the meantime, I pray that each one of you has a very happy and safe Thanksgiving and spending times with your families. And I look forward to seeing you on the 13th. God bless.